rush, grabbed my purse, and walked out. I never came back to the same life again. It happened on a Tuesday of all days. Dinner had been quiet, the way it always was lately. My husband, Derek, sat across from me, chewing slowly, eyes focused on the plate in front of him. I was just about to take a bite of the salad I'd spent half the evening preparing, when he suddenly pushed his plate aside and wiped his mouth with the napkin. The same napkin I had bought with my money, just like the food, the house, and everything else. "That's it," he declared. "We have separate meals now." I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. I laughed awkwardly, unsure of whether this was a joke. "What do you mean?" But he didn't smile. He didn't even look up. "I'm tired of supporting you," he added, leaning back in his chair. "You eat what I give you, but you never contribute. It's exhausting." I felt the air leave my chest. My appetite vanished, replaced by a sudden, heavy numbness. This wasn't just about dinner. "Excuse me," I said, voice sharp. "What do you mean supporting me? You're the one sitting at the table with food I paid for." He didn't respond. Just sat there wiping crumbs from his shirt. And that was when it hit me, the thing I'd been avoiding for months. We weren't just fighting over food, we were fighting over finances. My money, his pride, our budget. The quiet war I had noticed had already been waged. I stood up. "I'm done." I didn't give him a chance to speak. I grabbed my plate, scraped the food off into the trash, and grabbed my purse. My hands shook, not from anger but from something deeper, something I had ignored for too long. "Where are you going?" "No," he asked, his voice almost too calm. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. I couldn't look at him anymore. Not with those eyes that had once been so familiar, now so distant. As I walked out the door, I heard him call my name, but it felt like a hollow echo. I drove without a destination, just driving to clear the suffocating thoughts filling my head. He had been acting strange for months, but this was a punch I hadn't seen coming. I had always supported us. I was the one working 2 jobs while he coasted by. He had been taking my money and my patience, and in return, I'd gotten nothing but cold dismissals and his growing resentment. I pulled into a quiet parking lot and sat for a while, trying to calm my breathing. That's when it hit me. All the small, quiet sacrifices I had made over the years to keep things together. All the times I'd allowed him to claim his decisions when we both knew the truth. I was the one shouldering everything. I wasn't just done with dinner. I was done with this. With him. With pretending we were anything but financially tied strangers. I needed a new plan, and it started tonight. I didn't go home that night. I needed space, more than just a few hours, to think things through. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted beyond dinner, beyond his casual declaration. My entire relationship with Derek had always been about compromise, but I realized how one-sided that compromise had become. I stayed at a friend's apartment, barely speaking, just letting the silence give me clarity. In the quiet, everything about my marriage that I had ignored started to pile up. The settled control, the unspoken expectations, the financial strain that had been buried beneath his charm and the comfort of routine. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with my friend, coffee untouched. "I can't believe you said that to me." She nodded, eyes soft with understanding. "You've been carrying it all, haven't you?" I didn't have to answer. She knew. I could feel it too. The weight of everything I'd been holding on to, trying to patch up holes in a relationship that was crumbling under its own foundation. When I returned home later that afternoon, Derek was there, sitting on the couch, his eyes glued to the floor. He hadn't moved, not since last night. He looked smaller, deflated, like he knew the mask he'd been wearing had cracked wide open. "Caroline," he said quietly, "I'm sorry. I didn't respond right away. I just looked at him. Really looked at him, the man I had tried to protect, the man I'd let pretend it was all okay." "You said that before," I finally said, "and it doesn't change anything." This time I wasn't waiting for an apology. I was waiting for change. He didn't argue. For once, he didn't try to talk his way out of it. Didn't offer excuses or deflections. He just sat there, his hands resting on his knees, like he was trying to figure out where things had gone so wrong. "I never meant to make you feel like this," he said finally, his voice quieter, almost pleading. I could see the regret in his eyes, the guilt, but it didn't make the past few months disappear. It didn't take away the sinking feeling I had when I thought about the sacrifices I'd made, the things I'd given up to keep us afloat while he had continued to coast. "I don't think you ever meant to make me feel this way," I said, standing up and pacing the room. "But you did. You have for months." He stayed silent, the weight of my words pressing down on him like a hand on his chest. I stopped pacing and looked at him. Really looked at him. For the first time in a long time, I felt no warmth, no connection, only a quiet certainty that I had been alone in this marriage for far too long. "I'm done," I said quietly. "Done with pretending, done with fixing everything. I don't care about the budget anymore, Derek. I care about myself." He didn't reply. He didn't need to. The silence was the answer. I walked out of the room, not sure where I was going, but certain I wasn't coming back to the same life I'd been living. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what would come next. I spent the next few days staying with a friend, sorting through the emotions I had pushed aside for years. The anger, the hurt, the realization that I had been carrying more than just the weight of our finances. I had been carrying the emotional labor of a marriage that was never really a partnership. I didn't answer Derek's calls at first. The texts came, then the voicemails, each one more desperate than the last. But I didn't need to hear him explain himself again. I had already heard enough of that. I didn't need apologies. I needed action. One afternoon, I sat down and went through the bank statements, each transaction more revealing than the last. The money I had spent trying to patch things up, the personal expenses I had let slide in favor of our joint responsibilities. The truth was staring back at me, in black and white, and it was harder to ignore than any argument or apology could ever be. The next morning, I finally answered his call. "I'm done with this, Derek," I said, my voice steady despite the ache I felt in my chest. "I've been carrying the weight of everything, and I can't do it anymore. Not for you, not for us." There was silence on the other end, then a faint, broken sound, something between a sigh and a sob. "I'm sorry, Caroline," he whispered. "I know," I said, but it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. And for the first time, I didn't feel the need to explain why. I filed for separation the next week. It wasn't as dramatic as I expected. There was no argument, no shouting, just paperwork and a quiet acknowledgement that we were finally unraveling what had been tangled for too long. I didn't feel relief, not immediately. I felt a strange emptiness, like I had just signed away parts of my life I hadn't even realized I was holding on to. Derek didn't fight me, at least not in the way I'd imagined. He didn't beg. He didn't try to sway me with promises he had no intention of keeping. He let me go. For the first time, I was relieved that he didn't try to stop me. I spent the days that followed sorting through our things, the things I had once thought we'd keep forever. I boxed up his clothes, his books, the things he had left behind without a second thought. It wasn't anger driving me anymore. It was clarity. When I cleared out the last of his things, I didn't feel grief. I didn't feel triumph either. I just felt the weight of a life I had given everything to, now disassembled. It was strange, but also freeing. A week later, Derek came by to pick up the final boxes. He didn't ask for any explanation. He didn't say anything except a soft, "Goodbye, Caroline." I nodded, and when I closed the door behind him, I knew for certain this was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment I was finally free. The weeks that followed felt like a fog lifting. I was back in control of my life, but it wasn't an instant transformation. It took time to unravel all the little things that had become part of me over the years. The self-doubt, the belief that I wasn't enough, that somehow, if I gave more, if I worked harder, it would all fix itself. But now I was rebuilding. I started focusing on myself, really seeing myself for the first time in ages. I spent weekends with friends, reconnected with hobbies I'd forgotten, and most importantly, I started going to therapy. I didn't need to fix everything immediately. I just needed to process. Garrick texted occasionally, but each message grew less frequent, less urgent. He didn't know what to do with the space I had left. I didn't respond to any of them. I found myself making decisions with ease, choosing how to spend my time, my money, my energy, without the constant weight of his indifference. One afternoon, I stood in front of the mirror and finally saw it. The woman I had become, not in spite of my marriage, but because I had chosen to stop surviving it. For the first time, I saw her clearly, strong, resilient, and free. The final text came 2 months after the separation was finalized. "I hope you find happiness, Caroline." I stared at it, then deleted it, because I had already found. Death. I spent my days in a rhythm that didn't revolve around him, didn't revolve around any expectation, except my own. I found new joy in small things, in waking up without a knot in my stomach, in cooking dinner without calculating how it would be received, in walking through my day knowing that no one's judgment or disappointment could touch me. One evening, I went out for a drink with a friend. We talked about everything: work, life, the future. She asked me if I ever thought about getting remarried, and I realized for the first time that I didn't want to think about it. I was too busy building a life that was mine to spend time fantasizing about anyone else's. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't angry anymore. I was simply clear. And clear was everything I had never been while I was with him. One night, months later, I saw Derek at a coffee shop. He was sitting with a woman I didn't recognize, talking easily, laughing in a way I hadn't seen in years. He looked content. I didn't feel any sadness, not even curiosity. I simply smiled, took my coffee, and walked out the door, not looking back, because I realized then that I wasn't part of his story anymore, and I wasn't waiting for anyone to write mine. I was the author now, and that was the most liberating truth of all.